Hello and welcome to Season 11, Episode 4 of the Data Governance Podcast. And this week's episode is one that I have been looking forward to for a very long time. I love it whenever I meet Ben at conferences and we have the most amazing chats. Ben knows everything about data, but not only that, he is really good at explaining complex ideas in really simple language. So I just knew he would be a perfect person to have on the podcast to discuss what data fabric is and whether we need to care about it as data governance people, because I really struggled to get my head around the concept until Ben explained it to me last year. So I'm really looking forward to this conversation. So let's not hang around, let's dive on in. This episode is sponsored by Ortecha. Ortecha is the data analytics and AI consultancy that empowers businesses around the world to thrive through data. Data shouldn't be a headache, so whether you're navigating complex regulations, drowning in endless spreadsheets, or trying to make AI actually work, Ortecha's experts can help you cut through the noise and get to what really matters. No jargon, just clear, pragmatic solutions. If you're ready to turn data into opportunity, visit ortecha.com, where data is made human. Welcome, Ben.
Thank you. It's wonderful to be here with you, Nicola.
So I've been really looking forward to this because I always learn something every time I talk to you. But what really sticks in my mind is that a couple of years ago, when people first started talking about data fabric, I've asked a number of people, well, what is it? How's it different from data mesh? Because I get what data mesh is, but what's this data fabric thing? And 3 different people explained it to me. I think one I probably fell asleep in, and the other 2 I'm just going, I'm really none the wiser. And then while we were preparing for a panel at a conference, I said to you, oh, Ben, I'm really looking forward to this because I'm hoping we'll talk about data fabric because I just don't get it. And you just explained it really simply. And I got it and went, why did nobody ever tell me that before? They've made it sound like this really big, scary, complicated thing. So it's a joy to have you on the podcast so that hopefully you can explain far better than I could to all my listeners so they can get clearer on what data fabric is and perhaps why, as a data governance person, they need to worry about it. But before we dive into that, what I really love knowing about people on my podcast is, how did you get into data in the first place? Because people often view it as perhaps an unusual career choice. So what made you have this amazing career in data?
Well, what a wonderful question. And I guess one of the things that I was really interested in I went and did mechanical engineering at Bristol University back 1996, 1997, and graduated in 2000. I was working on BAP propagation neural networks, so a kind of machine learning that eventually became large language models. And the project that I was working on was all about how we could detect what kind of vehicle was going over a metal plate so that we could sort of improve way stations. Because way stations back in the day, particularly with lorries, they had to stop for ages until all balanced perfectly, and it was actually losing a lot of commerce and money for a lot of organizations. So we built some sensors to do this, and I did all the mathematical modeling and collecting the data from these kind of laser proximity sensors underneath and training machine learning models in those days with this. And so I was fascinated by, I didn't realize at the time I was doing vector databases and vector data sets. Then I went into finance. I was lucky enough to be a graduate at Citigroup, and I realized that all of the processes that I was supporting in business continuity and disaster recovery could be improved with data. So I started to design small databases with the little knowledge I had at the time, and to improve and automate some of the jobs that I was doing. And it sort of really snowballed from there. I started to become a business analyst, and then later a data analyst, and later a data architect, as my passion for how data could make things work better. It was enhanced, but also my knowledge and experience grew. It's a long answer.
I know, but it sounds amazing. I didn't know that that's how you started. So, yeah, and I just think it just shows that obviously you are data through and through. Some of us, like me, kind of fell into it perhaps about, well, probably about a third of the way. Yeah, well, maybe just over a third of the way through my career, I kind of got into data, but it is amazing. So, obviously, the reason I invited you on the podcast was one, I love chatting to you, but two, to discuss more about this data fabric
Yes.
because you know it's really hard. You go on LinkedIn these days, and there are so many posts about data fabric, data mesh, and we don't really understand, from reading some of the posts, you'd think they were the same thing, but I now know that they're not. So, can you explain what is data fabric and how does it relate to data mesh?
Well, I'm so glad that you've asked that question because actually I think a lot of people struggle with this. And actually, there is a problem. I mean, maybe it's too harsh to say it's a problem, but in the industry there are buzzwords out there that get hijacked by marketing departments and applied to whichever tool that a vendor is providing. And that's it's probably good marketing, but I call it marketecture a lot of the time. These phrases, actually, data fabric, data mesh, and very useful constructs when fully understood, but it's hard really to get to what they mean. I couldn't find a good definition back when I was first looking into this. I understood the principles, but people would say, oh, well, it's got a knowledge graph, there's active metadata, and it was a bit like saying, well, you don't describe something by what it's got. It's a bit like saying I've got a head and legs, but that doesn't distinguish me from a horse or a dog, for example. So, and far better to actually say something more meaningful around what it does. And so we came up with this definition: smart, automated data management at scale. Now, obviously, data management, data governance, these are really well-established practices. But to be able to smartly automate something, you have to have a reasonable understanding of the maturity and the structure and the principles behind that. The scale bit, I think, is important because you can actually throw a lot of bodies at a problem if it's not too big. And so over a petabyte of data, or more reasonably, if you're going to be more accurate, the complexity of the data, if it gets to a high level of complexity, you just can't win only with people. You need to be able to do some smart automation. And that automation, generally, I would describe as machine readable data handling policies that combine metadata and constraints. And the smart aspect of it is best described as a knowledge graph or semantic model that helps you navigate all of this and apply it in the most meaningful manner. So smart, automated data management at scale. That's what I think of when I think of data fabric.
So data fabric's more probably what I'd consider perhaps more technical side of data
Yeah.
management.
Yes, very much so. And I'm a big, even though that I often am known for focusing more on the technical aspect of it, the technical aspect will never work without the human aspects of it first. The strategy, the op model, the people, the why you're doing this. There is also a temptation in the industry to hope that the new shiny tool is going to be a silver bullet that's going to solve everything. And, I'm a big believer in technology as an enabler, but it is absolutely never the sole answer. So, in my view,
I totally agree with you on that one. So I've seen, I've not dialed into them because I've just said, no, I've seen webinars and like publicized online that are saying, data fabric or data mesh, which do you need? But they're not the same thing, are they? How do they relate to each other even?
I really think that they are highly complementary constructs. And yeah, I love the whole data fabric, data mesh. Again, I think it's probably perpetuated by people who are trying to sell you a product more often than not. To compare the two, I just to explain my understanding of a data mesh, and of course, Zhamak's book is a fabulous book if you want to dive into it in more detail. But it's a basically federated reusable data products for business value. And the federation aspect is is to recognize effectively that the business and operations and technology and various departments across the organization all create and consume data. And for the data that they create, you can empower them to own data products that create data value across the enterprise. The key thing is, though, is that you want those to be interoperable, because otherwise you've just got a whole bunch of data silos, which most organizations already have, and there's nothing new about that.
No,
But
we
if you
just
make
call them
them,
data products instead now,
yes, and oh
instead of Excel
gosh,
spreadsheets.
and isn't there a human temptation for organizations and individuals to do that? Oh, well, we already had this thing lying around. Let's call that a data product. But yeah, the interoperability is really key. And so, the also doing it from a value perspective. You wouldn't create a product, a physical product, with no understanding of what the market was or the use or the value is. So it's really important to actually go into the data product side of things and data mesh, understanding the value you're trying to create. And then you can decide what's proportionate associated with developing that and maintaining it. I find that data mesh is much more of a socio-technical architecture. So it's actually far more relatable in a data management and data governance perspective. But the real risk is that, yeah, we create silos. So actually, I always say, and I think Peter Jackson, Colin Gibson, and I first mentioned this at an A-Team group event a long time ago. You wrap the data fabric around the data mesh to avoid a data mess. I was going to say a data mush, but Colin and Peter both said actually mess is much better then. And I went, yep, you're right. Let's go with that one.
So yeah, so they're different things. It's not an either or. If you're going to be investing in perhaps what I think is these days called a modern data architecture, you want both.
Both, yeah, absolutely. Because then you've got smart automation of data management at scale, and you've got the reusable, valuable data products within the organization. So they're both highly complementary in my view.
No, that's very true. So obviously, they're terms that have been around. I think I'm hearing data fabric more than data mesh these days online. Perhaps it's the algorithms saying about what I'm clicking on and trying to read. But why are data fabric and data mesh popular? What has something triggered it in particular, do you think?
What a great question. I mean, reusable data is not a new concept, but it's not really been well communicated as and I mean, I guess data modeling and data are all about describing. Data is about describing experience, and data modeling, in my view, is about describing concepts and constructs that enable us to get better value and understanding and context from that data. Having a good construct like data fabric or data mesh enables us to encapsulate an idea in quite an elegant way and communicate that. And I think prior to these terms being established, it was hard for people to describe that concept. One of my fun examples is the horse whisperer. I don't know if you remember the film The Horse Whisperer.
Gosh, yeah, a while ago now.
It was a long show my age with every analogy. They were always, but in France, if you look it up, it basically the title of that film is The Man Who Murmurs Stories into the Ears of Horses, because they've not encapsulated the concept of a horse whisperer. So and actually, I mean, genuinely, you could look that up. It was quite fun. So what they did was encapsulate a whole bunch of established ideas into something that's much, much easier to understand. And those frameworks, also what I get excited about them, and I think that's also part of the zeitgeist of why their time is come, is that the idea that data management or data governance professionals should be separate from business architects, should be separate from technologists, was always a bit of a false dichotomy in my view. But then I've always been interested in all of those things. I see that with increases in technology and truly an understanding that there is an I in IT, the information seems to have been ignored a lot of the time in favor of the functionality, that actually the constructs of data fabric and data mesh at minimum enable these different parties to work closer together, at maximum, they actually become part of the same sort of movement.
Which is true because we are all supposed to be on the same side. I've worked in so many organizations over the years when it's a real them and us between IT and the business. But I always think that, I mean, I'm clearly biased. I think that data governance doesn't quite solve everything, but it does solve a lot of things. But I always feel the data governance manager or team are the ones that quite often are brokering conversations between IT and the business and other data teams like the architects, because what we do helps everybody do their job better. We don't produce anything amazing on our own as data governance people, but we enable everybody else to work better by breaking down some of those silos from the people side. And then you've then got tools like Fabric and Mesh that are allowing the technology to really then work because the people are talking to each other.
I couldn't agree more. And there is I mean, having been in both, in all of those departments actually in different guises, I guess one of the temptations that's worth that I keep seeing in technology, which is only human nature, is to grasp onto the data that they can see, which is the physical data encapsulated in systems, in existing systems. Often they've been designed like people, like I was about 15 years ago, who created often an entity relationship diagram to describe data for the primary, just for the function that application creates. So it's a very small world view. In fact, it's a little view of data specific for that. And if somebody falls into the thought trap of going, well, I'm just going to base my data model and all of my thinking about little islands of data views, siloed understanding of those views, then all I'm doing is encoding somebody's assumption about what their customer might use their product for, not actually what does my organization need and how can I leverage these systems to actually get the data that I need for my organization. Because whoever designed those systems would be making an assumption about what their clients need, and it may be a very generic client base that doesn't even properly include your industry. So technologists, I find, in the absence of data governance, often will fall into that trap where they're going, well, look, just going to document what I see. Data dictionaries all the way, not actually how can I unlock the business value from this data by understanding what the business needs and model it that way and then map to it, if that makes sense.
That makes perfect sense. And I'm writing a book on data governance at the moment. And I was actually writing the section about data catalogs last week. And I did this whole thing about they are not data dictionaries and very similar to what you're just saying about why they both have value, but how they're different things.
Yes, yes.
So, yeah.
Well, I'll be the first to read. I want to be one of the first to read your book. I know that it'll be
Excellent.
amazing, by the way, Nicola.
It'll be early next year, so that'll be really good. So we're rapidly running out of time. I wish I didn't have to be strict because I'm known for having podcast interviews that are shorter than some, but I'm sure we could do a really long form one. But I always like to leave my listeners with some practical advice. So I wondered if, given that most of the people listening will be in a data governance role or worrying and thinking about data governance for their organization, how does data governance work, or fit with what you've been talking about, data fabric and data mesh?
Fantastic. So they work beautifully together. You remember the data management at scale sort of portion of that. Data management, absolutely, and data governance is absolutely critical to unlocking the benefits of these frameworks. And if anything, these frameworks are only enablers for the goals, principles, standards, structures, operating models, and ways of working that data governance actually define. These are useful tools. My recommendation would be to recruit a good information architect or enterprise architect to your cause, and indoctrinate them in all of the great wisdom of data governance, as of course happened to me back in the day, and then hopefully they can be great ambassadors for you in implementing data management at scale. Yeah.
No, absolutely. Well, I mean, way before data fabric and mesh had even been thought of. And when I was still acting as an interim data governance manager, I used to go and like start a new contract, and I would go and find the enterprise data architect and introduce myself as their new best friend, which was somewhat of an icebreaker, but I meant it as well. Look, we can work together. We can do amazing things if we're allies. So this has been fabulous talking to you, Ben. Thank you so much for being on the podcast. And I really hope we can have you back again soon, because there are so many more questions I'd love to ask you for other people to get the benefit of your wisdom.
Nicola, thank you so much. It's been a joy. Keep doing what you're doing. It's amazing.
Thank you. I really hope you enjoyed my conversation with Ben as much as I did. Honestly, I wish that I hadn't chosen to have short form interviews, because we carried on chatting way after we stopped pressing record. Don't you just love his enthusiasm, and the way he explains things is just amazing. So I hope you've learned something valuable about data fabric, data mesh, and where data governance fits in all of that. And actually, if you want to find out more about the data products that we were talking about, in the last season, in season 10, you will find a few episodes all around data products, which is rather coincidental timing, because next week the podcast episode is going to be a short bite-sized one, but I'm going to look at data products, but purely from a data ownership point of view, because this is getting a question I'm getting asked increasingly often now, where people say to me, who owns the data in a data product? So I hope you will join me next week to find out.